and conquered German territory, they treated the civilian population with unheard-of brutality. In the villages of Gumbinen and Nemmersdorf in East Prussia, whole populations were wiped out. These atrocities led to the two largest maritime catastrophes in human history, as German civilians ran in terror of the Soviet army and sought to get across the Baltic Sea to Denmark and the rest of Germany. These were of the losses of the ships Wilhelm Gustloff and the General von Steuben. Both were refugee ships torpedoed by Soviet submarines. On both ships, between 7,000 and 10,000 people, mostly women and children, died. Between 14,000 and 20,000 people. Have you ever heard of either of these ships? I'm asking the students back there. Have you ever heard of the Wilhelm Gustloff or the General von Steuben? You haven't, because American press doesn't report about losses of Germans. By the time the war ended, several million women had been raped by Soviet soldiers who should have been their liberators. Virtually every woman in Berlin and Vienna, and many women in smaller German towns. In the West, it was better, but there were far too many incidents of rape by French colonial troops and even American troops. The use of rape against German women was the largest application of rape as the weapon of war in human history. Once again, how many of you have heard about that? How many of you have heard about the mass rapes of German women by Soviet officers, soldiers? The older generation of people who were impacted by it. I doubt the students have, because it's not taught. Perhaps the greatest of all these atrocities was the treatment of German prisoners of war. The Soviets held many until 1956, 11 years after the war had ended, and hundreds of thousands died at their hands. The Yugoslavs buried 3,000 alive in a seaside bunker that they walled up. The huge U.S. POW camps in the Rheinwiesen, or Rhine Meadows camps, in which there were no shelter, not enough food, and local people were forbidden from giving food to the captives on fear of being shot. Estimates of German POW losses in U.S. and French camps range up to 800,000. These are estimates of a fairly neutral French-Canadian author, James Bach, who Professor Wessler also mentioned. Once the Nazis were defeated, the Polish, Yugoslav, and Czechoslovak authorities had their chance to do what they viewed as even the slate. Poland and Yugoslavia set up numerous concentration camps for ethnic German citizens. In some of these camps, infant mortality was 100%. In Poland, 60 to 80,000 Germans died in these camps. These were people who were citizens of Poland before 1940, before the invasion. After the war ended, Polish authorities now admit that close to 99% of the people incarcerated and who died were innocent of any crime against Poland or the Polish people. In Czechoslovakia, many of the Nazi concentration camps were kept in use, but now for Germans rather than Jews. The most famous of which was Theresienstadt, which saw service until 1946. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rudy, I believe it's 46. All Germans were forced to wear armbands with an N for Nemets, which is the Czechoslovak for German, on them. They were subjected to much the same legal discriminations that Jews suffered under the Nazis. They weren't allowed to full rations, they were not allowed to use public transportation, were not allowed to go films, etc., etc., etc. There were many massacres of unbelievable brutality. In all, about 240,000 Sudeten Germans were killed or died during this period. The Poles, Czechs, Hungarians, Yugoslavs, Romanians, and Soviets were given the right to expel all or part of their ethnic German populations. Only the Romanians made very little use of this right. About 1/7 of the ethnic Germans from Yugoslavia perished. Virtually all the ethnic Germans from Yugoslavia, Poland, Czechoslovakia lost their homes, and were never paid any compensation for their losses. Once again, to this day, not a penny. Add to this the Germans from Germany proper, east of the Oder-Neisse line, and you have the largest act of ethnic cleansing in world history, with a total of some 15 million, some say 16 million, expelled from their homes, of whom 2.5 million lost their lives. You have to imagine this. 1/3 of the area inhabited by Germans was emptied of its inhabitants. 1/3. Are you familiar with these facts? Have you even heard about the camps for Germans, the expulsion, the 2.5 million dead? Please show me your hands if you have. Particularly, I'm interested in the students. If any of you heard about this, the students don't raise their hands. They haven't. Very few Americans know about these events because our press was silent at the time and continues to be silent to this day. Today, the war against German culture and language remains in effect. Little is written about what is positive about Germany or the Germans, whether in Germany, Switzerland, Alsace, Austria, or elsewhere. We're exposed to a nonstop torrent of abuse of the good name of the Germans. Jokes are made about German peacekeepers. How could there be such a thing, a German peacekeeper? In the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Slovenia, Serbia, Croatia, discriminatory anti-German laws known as the Beneš decrees and Avnoj decrees are still in effect to this day. Germans are excluded from getting their properties back by law, although Jews and others can get their property back. Even provably anti-Nazi Germans who attempted to reclaim their properties are prevented from so doing by the decrees. In Poland, the German minority continues to live in such fear that they are afraid to ask for rights granted them in present-day democratic Poland. The same applies to the Czech Republic, where the inhabitants of the few German villages that remain are so terrified that they do not even request bilingual signs for their villages. In Alsace, I have seen a group of 10 Alsatians speaking German amongst themselves immediately switch to French when a police officer draws within earshot. So cowed they are. And in the United States, German Americans interned during World War II in the same camps as Japanese Americans continue to be denied the recognition and, in my opinion, restitution granted to the Japanese over 20 years ago. I want to thank Rudy Pischel for his discussion of the intellectual re-education and intellectual ethnic cleansing of Germany. I don't want to add on to that at this point in time. Yes, my name is Kearn Schemm, and I'm a German American. I am also a person who believes in standing up for the weaker guy, the guy everyone picks on. The Germans are the weaker guy who have been so cowed, so frightened by the 90-year war against the Germans that they are terrified to open their mouths and state the basic fact. We are people too. Our pain counts too. Wrongs done to us need to be remedied too. I'm open to questions now. Thank you. Mr. Kopp.
Yes. Would you enlighten the audience about the German contribution during the colonial and the Civil War in numbers?
Well, numbers I don't know I can do. In the colonial period, there were roughly 10% Germans. Even then, there was a large number of Germans in the United States, primarily in Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey. But even John Adams's butler was of German descent, so they were even up into New England. Savannah, was it Savannah? I think it was Savannah, Georgia, was founded by Germans. And of course, General von Steuben created the discipline of the U.S. Colonial troops. The Battle of